Hello YouTube, Redneck Reloader here. Um, I'm not sure how this video is going to turn out. I had something I want to do. I've been thinking about doing this for a few days. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do this, so I'm just going to kind of wing it, and I hope it doesn't turn out to be unwatchable. But I'm a member, of a couple of different groups on Facebook and some forums for reloading stuff. Um, Most of them for beginner reloaders because I'm pretty inexperienced. I've been doing this what now, 6 or 8 months, and I get some good information off the forum sometimes, and I actually am able to help some people sometimes and give some information. But there's a lot of people on these forums that are just pain in the butts. I mean, they're not very helpful for new people. There are some real good people on there that do help a lot, but there's some other real bad ones too, and they kind of discourage people. And the reason I'm making this, there was a guy the other day on one of the forums that posted up. He had a very basic reloading setup, but perfectly capable of loading with what he had, but he had asked a question and he was kind of getting bashed a little bit, and I private messaged him and we talked a little bit. And one of the things he told me was that he had bought this equipment a while back and he reloaded a few rounds, but he had quit reloading because these guys had him convinced on the forum that he was going to blow his gun up or hurt himself. And then he decided to get back into it again, and they were kind of doing the same thing. And so I had referred him to one of my videos, and I said, I want to make a video for that kind of person. Because when I started this, I didn't have any money. And I don't have any money now. And these guys on these forums sometimes will start out. One of the famous things are the Dylan people. As soon as somebody comes on and says, well, I'd like to get started reloading. First thing is, well, you need to get a Dylan Progressive Press because you're going to buy one anyway. Buy once, cry once, You got to be able to crank out 5,000 rounds a week and stuff. That's not me. I'm never going to do that many rounds. I come out here for a hobby, my little shed, and do a little reloading. I'm not looking for high quantities. I just want the ability to reload. So, but people aren't dumb. You're going to get into this. They do a lot of research. They watch a lot of these videos. You read a lot of stuff, and that's the way I was. And I feel like a lot of people are, feel like they have a pretty good grasp of it before they ever get started. But then these guys just scare them off. So I am going to reload some 9mm ammo today, and I'm going to use very basic equipment that I have, which some of the stuff I use every day, some of it I don't. But I just want to show you don't need a lot. You honestly don't. And I recommend most people start out just doing pistol rounds. That's what I did. And then I just got into rifle. It's not that much difference, but there is a few differences. You need a little bit more equipment. You have to trim cases. And I was glad I did pistol for a while first. Kind of gave me that experience. And then I got into rifle. But anyway, we're going to load some 9mm. First, I'm just going to show you the equipment we're going to use this morning. You need some sort of a press. Now you can use, now I know there are like the Lee hand loaders and stuff. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about using a press. Lee does make like a handheld press, which I think would be fine. I've never used one. I don't think the brand of press or anything matters. For pistol, I think sometimes for the rifle rounds, you need a little bit heavier press. I've seen on the forums as people posting pictures of these kind of lightweight Lee presses that have broken when they're doing rifle rounds. I think they're made out of aluminum, cast aluminum. I've never touched one. I don't know anything about them, or just from what I've heard. But anyway, I've got two presses mounted on my breast. I don't need two presses. I won't go into that story. I put it in another video, but I have two presses. The one I'm going to be using today is my old Bear. Bought it used. You can get them for, $50. So I've heard of people finding deals and getting them for 20 and stuff at yard sales. I don't think the press really makes a difference, but that's my press I'm going to be using. It's an old Bear press, probably made in the 70s. The other press I have is a Rockchucker Junior 2, probably made in the 60s as far as I can tell. it works fine. I kind of have it set up for sizing and trimming 223. So that's what I'm using that for, 5.56. So that's why I have it set up. It just with my trimmer, it works a little bit better because it's vertical and my bear is got a slant to it. So when I use a trimmer with the slanted press, the shavings kind of build up and give me some trouble. So that's why I have the rock chucker here. Now I could load on the rock chucker. It's no problem. I have loaded some rounds on it, just fooling around with it. But I use my bear for actual loading. You need a set of dies. They don't have to be fancy. The dies I'm using now today, I'm going to use these rock chucker. I bought these brand new. They're very, very nice dies, and I like them. Do I have to use those? Absolutely not. For 45 ACP, I have an old set of used Redding dies. I've got some other dies out here I'm just going to show you that I've used. This is a set of C&H dies. These are for 38 Smith & Wesson. These dies were made in 1963. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They work just fine. And I paid $7 and something for these, but I had to throw in shipping. I think I've got maybe $15 tied up in those altogether. I've got this other set of dies out here to show you. I know it's a rock chucker box, but these are not rock chucker dies. These are actually Bear dies. Same people that made my press. I don't think they've ever been used. I don't see any wear on them at all. These were probably made in the 70s, at the 80s at the very latest, because that's when Bear went out of business. But these are perfectly usable dies. These are for 38 special. The only thing with you're using old dies like this, like my old Redding dies I use for my 45, you have to lubricate these. These are not carbide dies, so if you get a set of older dies, once again, those 38 special dies, I paid $3 and something for those. So you don't have to invest a lot of money. You can use these older dies. They work just fine. The only thing about it is if they're the non-carbide dies, then you will have to lubricate them. So lubricate your cases with those. That's not a big deal. Not a big deal. I guess if you're doing thousands of rounds, it would be. For me, not a problem. I bought a tub of this Hornady Unique Case Lube. Works great. Just smear a little on your fingers, put a little on the case, and you're fine. So you need a press, you need some dies, and you need a scale. Scale's kind of necessary. You got to be able to weigh your powder. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. I know a lot of people like the little digital scales. That's fine. I guess the prepper in me, I like old mechanical, reliable stuff. I have two scales. I usually use a Lee, the Perfect Powder Scale. I use that most of the time. But I've got this old HF Wells. I just wanted to show this to y'all. This is what I'm going to use today. I think I gave $10 for this. Cast iron base. This thing is bomb proof. But when I got it, the pan was not the original pan that came on it. And so, first off, it was just perfectly round pan. So I just took a pair of pliers and bent that lip in it so it's easier to pour the powder out of. But the other thing is it was too heavy. So I couldn't get the scale to balance out. Now, out here on the end, there's there used to be two lock nuts on here. You can that's how you would adjust it to balance the scale out. And the pan was just too heavy, so I removed one of those lock nuts. That lightened it up, but that lightened it up too much, where then I had the other problem where it was too light. So I had to add some weight back on, but not as much as the nut. So what this is right here is baling wire. I just took some baling wire and kept wrapping it around it and trimming it back until I got the right length where I could zero the scale and it would balance nicely. And that's what I have set up. So this scale works fine now. The way I zero it, which I already did this morning, so I'm not going to do it again, but I just zero it. I can adjust this knob, just this nut, just a half a turn either way, get it balanced nicely, and then it's done. Now right now I have it set for 4 grains of powder because that's what I'm going to be loading today and using it. These scales, just a note, this is just a balance arm. It's like a seesaw, okay? So it's a little sluggish this morning because you can probably see my breath. It's about 28 degrees out here in my shed. I've got a kerosene heater going, but it's not insulated. It's so drafty, and I keep it far enough away with the powder. It doesn't do much. I just kind of go over to it and warm my hands every once in a while. But this is a balance beam. When you get it zeroed and you get it balanced, it just sits level. And that's what it does. All these scales always have a little adjustment knob or something on them on the end of them. And I've heard people say that you use those to zero it. You don't use it to zero it. You zero it by getting it balanced. What these are for is to adjust for any unevenness in your table. So if you think of this beam is perfectly level, but if your table is not, it's not going to read right because the beam is level. That's where you adjust that knob to get it to where it's zeroing. But it really has nothing to do with the balance of the scale. It's just the unevenness of your table. So side note there. So anyway, this old cheap scale I bought, it didn't work properly. I fixed it. And I've got my Lee scale. I've set these side by side and I've weighed over and over and over again bullets, powder, different things, steel or lead shot, just to compare the weights to make sure that this was dead on after I fixed it. And it is. It's just as accurate as the Lee. So that's what I'm using today. So I'm using a very old press. I am using a new set of dies because that's what I have for 9mm, but I'm just telling you, you don't have to. And then a scale. And that's pretty much it. Anything else I use today is just going to be for convenience sake stuff, but you don't have to use it. I started out without a pair of calipers, and I have an old, this is a really cheap set of calipers. I bought this off of eBay. I think I paid like less than $5 for it. I actually didn't even buy it for reloading. I was using it for another project I was working on, and this will get you by to start with. Now, I do have a little bit better set of calipers now that goes out to 3 decimal places instead of 2. Very rarely use them, but when I do need them, I have them. But this thing's just plastic, just for setting bullet lengths and stuff. This will work just fine. We're going to load the 9mm, 147 grain, well, 145 grain, I think these are, lead bullets. And I already know what I'm going to set my overall length to, but I'll just show you. So that says 1.15. The max on the 9mm, I don't remember it off the top of my head. I've got it written down. It's 1.16 something. So at 1.15, we're well under the max. And this is actually a dummy round I made because I've shot these before, and this is a great length that works good for me. So I just make a dummy, and that makes it easier to set up my dies. Now, okay, I'm going to get started loading now. You've heard enough of my talking. I'm not going to go step by step how to set up the dies. I've done that in other videos, and I'm not going to do it today. You can go to one of my other videos if you want to. If you have any questions, send me a message. I'll tell you. One other thing I'm going to talk about is brass. Now, this is a reloading tray. I didn't have one of these forever, and I finally got one, got 2 of them. They're handy, they're convenient. You don't have to have them, but I just set this brass up in it this morning. I am going to use it today, but you don't need it. I just used to just set my brass on the table, just like that. It's fine. You don't have to have them in this. Why I want to show you this, I'm going to be using a few different pieces of brass this morning. These first 5 here were some rounds that I loaded, and I accidentally overcharged them, and I caught it, and I pulled the bullets. They've already been sized and primed. I'm just going to reuse them. I pulled the bullets, dumped the bullets in powder. I'm going to use these 5. These 3 cases, I found these up in the mountains the other day. Actually found about 150 rounds that somebody had dumped. I don't get range brass because I don't live anywhere near a range. Everybody just goes up in the mountains and shoots. And sometimes you get lucky and find a pile of brass where somebody's been there. It's very rare But this was like winning the lottery. It felt like when I walked on this and found all this brass. But that's some brass that I picked up out of the mountains. This is one piece of brass that I had bought. I'd bought, I think, 100 pieces of once fired brass that had been sized and polished and everything. And I've got maybe 20, 30 pieces left. I just threw this in here. I'm going to load it too. The reason I'm doing this, I want to show you the brass. That's another thing in these reloading forums. These guys are obsessed with their brass and how shiny it's got to be. That has nothing to do with anything as far as shooting goes. This I bought. You can see it's very shiny and pretty. That's nice. This stuff I picked up off the ground, and I fired this, picked it up off the ground, wiped it with a rag. You can see it's perfectly fine. There's no damage to the case or anything. They're a little tarnished. They get a little dark sometimes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect accuracy. It doesn't affect function of the round. It's just fine. Now, this brass is a little different. I did clean this brass. Now, I don't have a tumbler. I don't polish it. But where I found that big bunch of brass laying up there in the dirt, some of it was kind of muddy and dirty, and I really just wanted to wash it. So what I did with this is I put it in a plastic jug I have. I put in a little bit of vinegar, maybe a couple inches in the bottom, poured in a little salt, just a drop or two of dishwashing detergent, and then filled it the rest of the way up with hot tap water. Shook the crap out of it for about 5 minutes and then let it set for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then I dumped it and rinsed it all off. And that does a very good job of cleaning. You can compare it to the one that I just picked up and wiped off with a rag versus the one that I did clean. It does clean them up a little bit, makes them a little bit shinier. It's nothing like the polishing that people do, but it does clean them. So, and just in that case where, I mean, I literally had some cases that had like mud and rocks and stuff in them, so I just really wanted to wash them. But that's all I do, case prep. I don't polish and tumble and all that stuff. It's not necessary. So, anyway, all right. I'm going to cut this a minute, make a jump, and then we're going to get into the loading. So, okay, we're going to try something a little different this morning than I usually do. Set my camera up a little bit different. You can kind of see how junked up my shed is. I just have a little corner here. I'm surrounded by lawnmowers and weed eaters here. First die is going to be the decapping and resizing die. Now, some of these cases I had were already resized because they're the ones I pulled the bullets off of. They're already primed and everything. So, yeah, I'm not going to run them through this step. Now, this would normally deprime, but this brass, I've already deprimed it. So, it's not going to be depriming it, but it would be. So, I'm just going to run them through the dies. Like I said, I'm not getting into real great detail how I set the dies up. I do that in other videos. This brass has actually already been sized. I sized it when I decapped it, but I'm going to go ahead and just run them through anyway, just to make sure it doesn't hurt. And this was the stuff I bought that was resized. But anytime I do that, I always run it through my resizer because I just don't trust it. So, all right, that's it for that. Now, I'm going to change the dies. And the next one I'm going to do is my expander die. Load it up quick. I don't have a big problem with setting these dies up usually. If I'm doing, like 100 rounds, it's not that big a deal to set one up. It's not as time consuming as what everybody makes it out to be. Alright, so this brass, this is the stuff that's already primed, it's been resized, but I have to rebell the case mount because I had pulled the bullets on this. A little bit of press maintenance here. This older press, the shell holders are held in place with an Allen screw, and I'm just going to snug that up a little bit. It was a little bit loose. I don't like it if it's flopping around too much. Alright, so I'm going to run this up in here. I'm going to run this expander plug down. This is an M style expander, and usually for like a plated or jacketed bullet, you hardly have to bell it just a little bit, but these are lead bullets, so I like to put a little bit more belling on these. So I'm just kind of running it in a little bit at a time and belling that case mouth until I'm happy with it. That's pretty good. So I'm going to snug that down. Like I said, for the lead, I expand it more than what I do for plated or jacketed bullets, because I have a harder time seating them without shaving the lead and expanding the case mouth out. See, it doesn't take much. There's not a lot to this. And I'm going to do something I've never done with any of my videos. I'm actually going to take these out and shoot them, maybe. We had a little bit of a snowstorm here. You guys in northern climates probably laugh at us, but down south, I think we got about 3 or 4 inches of snow total. Getting up the mountain's going to be kind of tough. Luckily, I've got a couple days off here, so I've not had to go anywhere. But if I can get up in the mountains, I'm going to go up and shoot these rounds off and show you that I'm not going to blow my guns or my fingers off. Okay, that one's done. Now they're belled, case mouth expanded. This is the time I usually give it a little look-see too, and just make sure see if there's any problems. It seems like if you get any cracking or anything around the case mouth, this is the time that's going to happen. So it's a good time to look at them. So my last die, this is going to be my crimp bullet seating die. I'm just sticking it in just that far to start with, because I've got 5 of these cases are primed, but 3 of them aren't. So I'm going to have to prime these cases. I prime on the press. I'm going to show you how to do that. Once again, to me, if you have a press, I told you needed 3 things: the press, the die, and the scale. I guess you do have to have a way to prime. I didn't think about that. I've always just primed on the press. Both my presses, I've got these priming arms. Now, some people use little hand primers, whatever you want to do. If you don't have, I think every press I've ever seen comes with the priming arm of one type or another. It might look a little different. Snow people don't like to use them sometimes. I see a lot of people that use the hand primers and stuff. If your press comes with a priming arm, you can use it. If not, I guess you'll have to have something separate to prime with. But I like doing it this way. I've heard people say they like to do the hand, they get better control. To me, this is easy. I set them in. You don't have to have the little special primer tray to shake and turn them all over. I just lay my primers here on the table, and I've got big fat fingers, and right now my hands are frozen out here. It's still easy to pick them up and drop them in there. It's not that big a deal. Granted, if you're doing thousands of rounds, then yeah, you might want to do so, but for lower quantities, this is fine. So the way I do this is put the case up in there, you move the arm forward, and then you lower the ram, and it will seat the primer. And there we go. Seated, nice and flush. You can put them on the table and make sure they don't wobble back and forth if you're unsure if it's sticking out too far or not. And so we're just going to prime these 3 cases. One more. Okay, those are done. Now, next up, we're going to put our powder. So, I'm going to do a cutaway, come back. Okay, now we are to the point where we're going to charge these with powder. I've actually charged most of them already, just to save you all from having to watch me fight with the scale. As I said, this is a very old scale. You have to have some kind of accurate way to measure powder. I know most people nowadays just go with the digital scales. Like I said, I like this, the older ones. I don't usually use this scale. I actually use the Lee scale. I prefer it. Just basic because it settles down faster. That's when, which you'll see. That's why I didn't want to, you'd have to sit there watching me weigh out all these loads. This is a very slow way of doing it. But I'm a big fan of dippers. I've got a set of lead dippers. You're going to see this in a minute. This is a lead dipper. This is the one that should work for the charge that I'm working up, but they usually weigh less. They usually come in less than what they say they're going to. And so I don't actually have a dipper that will work with this charge. If you do use these dippers, they're kind of nice because you don't have to use a funnel with them. You can literally just dip it, and you can see they're kind of tapered, so you can set the case right over it and then just flip them back over and charge them that way. That's the way I do 45 ACP because I have a dipper that works nicely with it. I don't with this. I don't load these bullets very much, these lead bullets, so the cast ones. So I haven't made a dipper for them, but I have made a few dippers. They're not difficult to do. These are two that I've made for loading 223. These are 45 ACP cases. One's aluminum, one's brass. These are just a very stiff plastic straw. And I just used hot glue to put them together. And what I did was this one is for one type of powder that I use, and I need 25 grains. This one is for a different powder, and I need 24 grains of it. What I did was I figured out that they were both fairly close, and I glued them, and then I inverted them. I put a piece of sandpaper on the table and just worked it back and forth and sanded it down a little bit, and then I would dip and throw some and weigh them and go and take a little bit more off until I got these right. And now that I've got them sized right, this is how I load my 223, depending on which powder I'm using. I don't weigh out the loads. I just dip them and drop them. If I were going to load more of these lead rounds, I would make one for this. I wouldn't sit here and weigh everyone out this way. But I'm just telling you, if there are other ways of doing stuff. You can also get a powder thrower, which I have. I did a review on this Konos powder measure I got for 15 bucks. It works pretty good with unique powder, and I use it a lot when I'm loading, 100, 200, 300 rounds. I'll just use it, or a dipper. But this is the slowest method. But the reason I'm doing this is to show you can do it with just this. If you've got just the press and a scale and a set of dies, you can load this way. It might be a little slower, but you can do it. Now, I got to get the powder in there. I'm going to use a powder funnel because that's just the easiest way to do it. This is convenient. I didn't always have a powder funnel. I didn't buy one of these for a long time because, to be honest with you, I just could not break with the money for one because for a plastic funnel, I just felt they were really overpriced. And I finally just got one. Most things like this you end up picking up, it seems to me they're just for convenience sake. Just like that loading tray. It's convenient for holding stuff in place, but actually when you're charging the cases, it's better for me to set them down like this and do them because the funnel fits over them better. And I'm not getting that in my view real good. When I drop that powder funnel over it, you see it goes almost to the base of the case. If I try to charge them in here, they actually hit this plastic thing and the funnel doesn't go all the way down and end up spilling powder. So even when I'm using this, just for convenience sake, when I actually charge, I actually set them down on the table to do them. So I've got most of these cases charged. I'm going to go ahead and dump this one. And I've got one more that I've got to weigh out, and that one I'll do on camera so you can kind of see the process that I do. Probably not the best way to do it. This is not my favorite scale. Like I said, I usually prefer to use the Lee scale. The reason why is, excuse me, knocked my tripod over. The Lee scale settles down faster. This one bounces and bounces and it takes a while. Talking about powder too, if you're going to get started in pistol powder, I recommend Unique. This is a very flexible powder. It's easy to meter out with this. Now, I understand with powder throwers, some of them say it's tougher. It works fine with mine, and it's a very versatile powder. I mean, I load all the pistol rounds I load with it, and I also load shotgun shells with it, and it lasts a good long time. So rather than jumping into all these different types of powder, I recommend you stick with one for a while and get used to it, and then you can switch around if you want to. So I use these little dippers for throwing powder, even though it's not going to give me the right amount. They're still handy just to use. So I'm going to dump this, and it's not going to be enough. That's going to get it floating around a little bit. My scale's kind of hanging a little bit this morning. It's kind of rubbing on the side. There we go. It's just so cold this morning. A lot of stuff's not wanting to work right. That's actually pretty close. I actually threw a little more. I had that kind of heaped over. So I'm going to take a little bit out and let it settle down. I don't use a trickler. Once again, that's another convenience thing. I understand why people use them. They are kind of handy. Because when you get this close and you have to put a little bit more powder in, yes, you can use a trickler. You don't have to. I use a little lead dipper. By the way, I used to use a plastic spoon before I had the lead dippers, and those work just fine too. But when I have to trickle more in, what I do is just set this on the side and just gently give it a couple little taps. And if you sit there and tap it, you can knock out the powder just a flake or two at a time. And that'll just let you inch it up until you want it. That's probably pretty close right there. And you see, I just use a cut down Dixie cup to put my powder in. Now, gotta wait for the scale to settle. That's what I don't like about this scale. The Lee scale, it's magnetically dampened, so it's got some magnets in it that as it gets closer to zero, it kind of tracks it and pulls it and stops all that oscillation. But my shed is uninsulated out here. It's a little drafty sometimes, and all of that affects it. And if this thing starts swinging, it seems to take 5 minutes to settle down. So I try to never bump the pan when I'm putting powder in, because if I bump it and get it swinging, it's going to be a little bit before it settles down. So that's why I did most of these off camera, so you guys didn't see them. But that's what I did for the other 8 rounds. I went ahead and did this exact same procedure. I'm loading 9 total today. Just about there. It's a little light still. I'm going to put just a few more flakes in there. Alright, I'm going to call that good. So, put a funnel on there, dump our powder. And we're done with that part of it. The other thing I used to do before I had, when I didn't have a funnel, is I would just hold the shell in my hand like that and kind of make a funnel out of my hand and dump the powder. And that actually worked pretty good. All right, that part's done. We're going back to the press now. So I'm not very good at editing, folks. I'm sorry. I'm not a camera guy. I'm just going to turn the camera back here so you can see what we're doing. Instead of starting it again. Alright, I've already got my die set up. Like I said, I'm not going to do a lot of die setup in this. My cases are now primed, charged. The case mount is flared. I put a lot of flare on these two, by the way, just for the cast bullets. I don't put nearly this much on when it's a jacketed bullet, but for the cast lead bullets, I feel you need a little bit more to get them to seat good and go in there well. So that's just the way I do it. So I've already got this all set. So now this is going to seat the bullet and crimp. Now, I'm going to do what they call a plunk test to make sure that these are working okay. Before I do it with these bullets, I'm going to just wipe them off. And the reason I do that, this has got some lube in it. You see that blue band on the bullets is lube. And sometimes when you press them in, that lube works its way up and you get a little bit of it on the shell, on the bullet itself. And I found sometimes you go to do a plunk test and it won't quite go all the way in. It's not because the crimp is off or anything. It's because of that little bit of lube. It'll chamber fine in the gun because it's just going to push it on in. But if you're just doing a plunk test, sometimes it kind of drags. So now I'm going to use a case gauge. This is a Lyman case gauge with all the different pistol calibers. Once again, you don't have to use this. This is a fairly recent purchase for me. I kind of splurged and bought that. It's handy. I can keep it out here at the reloading bench, and no matter what pistol caliber I'm loading, I can just do a quick plunk test. What I used to do is take my barrel apart, take my gun apart and take the barrel and do the plunk test in the barrel. That's really the best way to do it because you want to get shells that work in your gun rather than just a general chamber. But I found that my 9mm is pretty forgiving, so if it's going to work here, it'll work in the 9mm. I've got a couple of them. But this is just handier. But if I didn't have this, I would just take my barrel and do it. And that's what I suggest you do. So we're going to just drop it, plunk it in. It goes in there nice and a little below flush there. Comes out easy. That's a good one. So I don't do that to everyone. I just do a few when I'm first setting up the die to make sure that I'm doing my crimp okay and the bullet seating okay and everything. So the next one, same thing. I'm just going to wipe it off. Get any lube off of there. And see, that one didn't quite go in there good. So I'm going to look and see what the problem is. I'm putting a little bit of crimp on this. Not a whole lot, but a little more than what I usually do. Well, actually, see, I went right in that time. That was a little bit of lube stuck inside the case gauge. So that little lube, you gotta watch that stuff. So this is fine. These are fine. I'm not going to check anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and load these last 4 that I've got here. That was that case that I bought, that real shiny one. And a little bit of maintenance this morning. That's loosened up again, that shell holder. You can see I can spin it in there. It won't come out. It just kind of wiggles a little bit. I'm just going to give it a little snug down. Just because that's a little OCD bit, I guess. I just don't like that. And I'm peeking at every one of these cases too before I do this to make sure they've got powder in them. So I don't do a squib load. That's good. Okay. Just talking to myself here. I was trying something different with that last bullet. This is one of those, I told you I pulled some bullets because I accidentally, what it was, I was loading some hollow point 9mm. They were very light grain, 115 grains. And I was using my powder measure, and I had set it up for that. Then I went back and loaded some of these heavier cast bullets, and I forgot to readjust my powder measure. So luckily I hadn't done very many before I realized that I did about 35 of them, and so I had to pull the bullets. I'd use a bullet hammer and pull them, and that's a bullet that I had pulled, and I was just reusing that, and so I was making sure that everything was cool with that. All right, that's it. I'm gonna do something I've never done before now. Next time you see me, I'm going to be up in the mountains with my gun. We are going to shoot these 9 bullets that we just made. And I'm going to show you that I did it with very minimal equipment, and I'm not going to blow my hands off when I use these. So we'll see you in a bit. Okay, YouTube. I don't know how this is going to turn out because I don't have my regular microphone on, and I'm shooting outdoors, which I've never done before, but we're gonna give it a shot. I've got these rounds I loaded. There's that real shiny one. I'm gonna load these up. I'm gonna shoot them out of my carbine this morning. Doesn't really matter, but I haven't shot it in a while, plus it's cold, and it's easier to shoot it with gloves than it is my pistol. I don't know what the sound's going to be like on this. Like I said, I've never shot any shooting video before, but we're going to give this a shot. So I got 9 rounds. I loaded using minimal equipment. Eyes and ears. There we go. All 9 fired, no problems. Didn't blow my fingers off or anything else. So this will tell you, you can reload with very minimal amount of equipment. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Signing off. Thanks.